Civil War Part 2, the Trent Affair. Hey, turn the clock back to the early 1800s real quick. All righty, how'd the War of 1812 start? Remember when British and French were hijacking our ships? Yeah, well, now time for us to hijack one of theirs. The USS San Jacinto stops the Royal Mail Service, Trent, British ship, and there's two guys writing on this, John Slidell and James Murray Madison, who fancied themselves to be Confederate diplomats. No, you're not. It's not a real country. That's why they're going over. Get recognition as a real country from the British, right? We're not going to let this happen. So we stop the ship without permission, grab both of these guys, and Great Britain is shouting, this is the international law definition of piracy. It probably is, but we're also fighting a civil war, so mind your own business. Britain is extremely upset about this. London tells us they're very upset, and they recognize the Confederate States of America as a belligerent. Right? You're not recognizing them as an actual country. You're not sending ambassadors or anything, but you are recognizing them as an enemy nation fighting another enemy nation. Now, in diplomatic speak, this means they're upset with you, which means any ship with a Confederate flag can come flying into London and you can't touch them. That's what this means. Because if London had considered the Confederacy to be merely in rebellion, then if a Confederate ship comes sailing into London, they can grab it and hand it back to the U.S. But nope, they're pretty mad with us. So Lincoln apologizes, tells the British, sorry about that. I'll make sure I punish that captain. But then he gives Captain John Wilkes a Medal of Honor right there in the middle of Congress and forgot the British ambassadors there watching the whole thing. Yeah, you gotta check out that guest list. So Britain's pretty mad at us. Now, we're tied up down in with the Confederacy. Remember the Monroe Doctrine? Yeah, we tried to tell the Europeans to stay out of Latin America. Well, we're tied up with the Confederacy, and France decided to try and take over Mexico. In 1861, Mexico owed France, Britain, and Spain a lot of money, so those three countries got together and took over Veracruz till they got their money back. So Britain and Spain got their money, but France hangs on because they think maybe they could take over Mexico and turn it into some kind of a colony. It's going to fall apart and go very badly. But this is what's going on when we're tied up in the Civil War. The cat's away, the mice are playing. Meanwhile, let's hurl an even bigger army right at Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee, right? Battle of Chancellorsville. This time the biggest Union army they've had, when it's going to get completely destroyed. Right? The new commander after Burnside got canned is Fighting Joe Hooker. Yeah, isn't that a great name? There's three words that come out of the Civil War. One is the F word. Yeah, it didn't exist before the Civil War. We think it came out of New York area. Big surprise there. You also know about the term sideburns from your friend Burnside. And now John Hooker, very popular with the soldiers, wanted to make sure the morale was up, and certain ladies would make themselves available for companionship. Hence the name John Hooker. All right, moving on. So they hurl a huge force into Chancellorsville, Virginia, and it gets completely destroyed. As you can see here in this picture, the cannon's facing the wrong way. These are clearly Confederate soldiers. Yeah, it does not go very well. Well, sometimes you win and you still lose. Confederacy wins the battle, and then Stonewall Jackson gets hit by friendly fire. After the battle, when everything was still in chaos, Stonewall Jackson, of course, has a tendency to operate from the front, sometimes even beyond the front. It was dark, he's coming the wrong direction, doesn't know the password, and the sentry opens fire and kills Stonewall Jackson. Man who did this was Major John Barry, the 18th North Carolina Volunteers. Way to go, NC! 18th was posted down near Wilmington. That's where they're from. He didn't get in any trouble because he did the right thing. You had somebody in the dark from the wrong direction, didn't know the password. You know, if it's anybody's at fault, it's Stonewall Jackson. But it's a pretty hard blow to the Confederacy if they lose Stonewall Jackson. If there's a general that might have been better than Robert E. Lee, it might have been him. Definitely never boring with that guy around. Well, Barry's going to make it all the way to the end of the war and have a nice long life before dying in Wilmington. Now, after Chancellorsville, right down here. See, Chancellorsville, here's Fredericksburg, where Burnside really got messed up, and here's Chancellorsville. This time Lee decides he's attacking the north again. Gonna do a little bit better job than he did in Antietam. This time we are going to win big. Instead of going head first towards Washington, he's gonna swoop around and either come into Baltimore, maybe to Philly, and cut it off, and maybe this could win the war, or cause enough damage for the Union to stop fighting, or maybe even get the French and British to come in, though it's starting to look increasingly unlikely. So off he goes, crossing up the Potomac River, and he goes through this little chunk of Maryland here, and then he goes to Chambersburg, this whole thing, and he's getting up to the top of the arc, and Battle of Gettysburg. Started by accident. Didn't really intend to go there. Well, there's a lot of roads coming out of here, so it's a good place to go anyway. All right, his cavalry with Jeb Stuart had run off over here towards Wrightsville, so he's walking in blind. It didn't take long for the Union to figure out that Lee's up here and turning around. John Hooker was in command for a while, then he got mad with Lincoln and immediately resigned. So they got George Gordon Meade, America's most underrated hero of all time, George Gordon Meade. So they had a big battle at Gettysburg, and Meade wins. He goes toe-to-toe with Robert E. Lee and wins. Yeah, but you never hear about him. You hear about Custer when he loses everybody, a little bighorn, but you never hear about Meade, do you? That's just something about America. It's a great injustice history. People who screw up get famous. The people who do their job you never hear about, you know? Anyway, big battle at Gettysburg. This is the biggest battle in American history, biggest battle in the Western Hemisphere. Lee loses and has to go back to Virginia. And Meade had a chance to try to attack him again, but his army was just way too messed up, just like McClellan down in Maryland. But, and of course, Grant was a little bit upset, but he didn't sack Meade. Meade is the last commander of the Army of the Potomac. He's going to stay their commander all the way to the end of the war. Same day Gettysburg is fought. Same day Lee retreats from Gettysburg. Vicksburg falls. Right, Grant finally takes Vicksburg, and they have cut the Confederacy in half. So things are looking great. It's a fantastic 4th of July in 1863. Cutting the Confederate pizza in half. Hey, here's a very important question I have for you. Are you ready? Where'd I get this pizza from? You probably already guessed it, right? Those orange things, a giveaway, Little Caesars. Oh, someone once wrote a paper here about Morgan's raid. All right, this was a Confederate band who, they said they were invading the North to help the Confederacy, but for some reason, all these places all had banks. And they were robbing the banks. Yeah, funny that, right? This is just kind of a weird side note. No one really hears much about Morgan raid because it's a small thing, plus, that Gettysburg thing was happening over here to the east. So every now and again, something weird happens in Ohio, and this was one of those weird things. They're hacking their way through Tennessee. It's not easy to do that because you got the mountains over here and the rivers, the Tennessee, the Cumberland River comes this way, so you got to cross that. Most of the west you walk down. This one you had to cross through. So you have to hack their way through that. While Grant is down there, his buddy Sherman is fighting his way through here because they're trying to cut that Confederate pizza in half. If they can fight their way through Tennessee, then they got Georgia. And after Georgia, you got Atlanta. After Atlanta, you're straight to the ocean. That's what they're trying to do there. There's a ton of battles out this way. You'll just go insane trying to memorize them all, right? You got Lookout Ridge and Chattanooga and Chickamauga and all these things. I'm not going to torture you with that. Just know there's a lot of fighting in Tennessee. Kentucky had attempted to declare itself neutral, which isn't going to happen in the middle of a civil war. And the Confederates had jumped in trying to seize it first. It didn't quite work out. So here they are fighting their way, trying to keep the Union out of Georgia. So off we go. Sherman hacks his way down through there, and he's going to march all the way to the sea. When he gets to in front of Atlanta, it starts looking like a preview of the First World War. The Confederates have dug in the trenches. It's really, really hard to get through. But sooner or later, they start the Confederates come out of the trenches to try and fight to go head on, and they get their army messed up. Sometimes you should stay on defense, but the Confederate general John Bell Hood, very aggressive guy, he drove straight at him and got his army messed up. So down goes Atlanta, and that's where all the railroads in the Confederacy go through. And there's really not a lot of railroads. So once you grab Atlanta, nothing is coming out of the West. They've taken the Mississippi. Now you've grabbed Atlanta, and all these slaves, oh, they're running free. They're following the U.S. Army around, and they are more than happy to help Union soldiers destroy the Confederate infrastructure. And here it is, marching its way all the way down through here. They're still hammering away over here at Richmond. And here we are. We're going to fight our way through. And he's going to make, and Sherman likes to burn things down. He's going to burn down Atlanta, right? Then he's going to make it to Savannah. The Union Army, a Union Navy supplies him. Not sure he's going to Charleston. The Confederates think he's going to Charleston. He fakes him out and goes to Columbia, burns that down. Comes marching up through here. Fayetteville burns down the arsenal. Nobody remembers. Eventually, he's going to trap Joseph Johnston up there in Raleigh. Now, while this is going on, we got to have an election. Now, before Atlanta falls, people aren't sure if Lincoln's going to win or not. And guess who's going up against him? Our old friend George McClellan, he's back. He runs for the Democratic Party ticket. Now, the war is very long, it's very bloody. Grab a quick drink here. There's still no guarantee the Union can win. This thing could still end as a draw for the Confederacy. And people in the Democratic Party of that time are promising peace if they win the election. The Republicans are calling them copperheads, like the snake that comes out of the grass, right? So McClellan's actually running slightly ahead until Sherman takes Atlanta and starts marching his way towards the sea. Once that happens, they know the Union's going to win the war. And once that happens, the Democratic Party has lost this election. Lincoln will get reelected. And look who he takes as his vice president. Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson is a pro-Union Southerner. He's from the Raleigh area, claims Tennessee as home. Why did he take Johnson as his vice president? Because he's thinking about after the war, right? Once this war is over, I got to rebuild the country. If I have a Southern vice president, that's telling the defeated Confederacy, hey, you're part of America again. We're going to rebuild it. And you're going to be part of that rebuilding. And the reason he wants to go easy on the Confederacy is because he doesn't want to fight this war every 20 years. Also reinforces the concept we're winning the war. So he's thinking beyond the war and everybody knows it. Well, our friend Grant comes east, right? And he's going to engage Robert E. Lee in a lot of battles, a place called the Battle of the Wilderness, where it looks like, again, World War I with the trenches and fighting in the woods and everything. And eventually they're going to wear down Robert E. Lee. They're going to have Richmond and Petersburg under siege for like 11 months. It's very bloody. A lot of people don't like Grant. They're calling him a butcher. He just kind of has to do what needs to be done. Meade's still in control of the Army of the Potomac, but Grant's the overall commander, and he's there all the time. Finally, they take Richmond, they push the Confederates to the backside of Virginia, and they decide to surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. Well, they let the Confederates off the hook. I mean, he handed the sword, he handed it back, he told all the Confederates, keep your weapons, keep a horse if you have it, and told all the Union soldiers to share their food because Confederates were starving. And basically let everybody go except Henry Wirz, who ran that horrifying concentration camp, prison camp down in Georgia. They hung him. But they're letting the Confederacy off the hook because, like I said, you don't want to have to refight this war over and over every generation. All right, it's time to come back into the Union. All right, everyone did a great job. Come on back. We're going to go easy on everybody, except if you're a Confederate officer, you don't get to run for election after the war. But everybody else, we're just going to go back and bring everybody back into the Union. Oh, yeah, and no more slavery. 13th Amendment. This is an interesting picture right here. I always like this picture. There's Lee. Here's Grant. Eli Parker, right? It's an Iroquois Indian. Here's George Custer. He's going to go over there and get destroyed out in the West in 1876. There's Hancock. So, they just want this thing to be over. Okay? It's going on long enough. Now, the guy who owned this place was Elmer McLean. He had a house at Bull Run, and of course, had artillery blasting through his house. So he moved to Appomattox to get away from the war. Yeah, and the war ends up in his living room. So that guy could never get away from anything. But if they had eBay back in the 19th century, imagine how much this stuff would have gone for. So the war's all over. It's all done. Time to go celebrate. Hey, let's go to the movies. There's no movies. Let's go to a play. Abraham Lincoln goes to watch Our American Cousin, and he's going to get shot in the head by John Wilkes Booth. Where is the security here, man? I mean, really? Well, John Wilkes Booth shoots him in the head, jumps off this thing, lands on the stage, apparently broke his leg and still staggered off. Again, somebody want to stop the guy who shot the president by any chance? Eventually they'll catch him and kill him. But yeah, Lincoln is assassinated just before the final surrender of Johnston down in North Carolina, and this changes Reconstruction, because had Lincoln lived, he was talking about malice towards none and charity towards all. He wants to end the war, begin the reconstruction of the South, and had he lived, it would have been much easier. But now he dies, and we've got Andrew Johnson in charge, and he's a Southerner, and you just fought a war against the South, so as you could imagine, even the people in the Republican Party aren't too crazy about him. There we are. Johnson surrendering on the 26th, where Lincoln was assassinated on the 15th. And Reconstruction, as a result, is going to be a lot tougher than it has to be. But we're going to get it done. It's not going to be easy, but we don't shy away from a challenge, right? Because we're America. The Reconstruction saga is next. Have a great day.